If almost everything you've been told about healthy eating came from one giant misunderstanding, would you even know it? Some nutrition myths are so convincing that even science struggled to kill them. Most people think nutrition gets clearer as science improves. We discover new foods, run better studies, and eventually separate fact from fiction. But that's not what happened. Some of the biggest nutrition myths in history refused to die even after the evidence changed. Why? That's the mystery. Because these weren't just bad ideas. They shaped supermarkets, school lunches, government guidelines, billion-dollar industries, and even the way your parents taught you to eat. And here's the strange part. Many of these myths sounded completely logical. Some were even backed by scientists. Yet today, many have either been overturned or revealed to be far more complicated than anyone imagined. So how did so many intelligent people get so many things wrong? To answer that, we have to follow the myths themselves. And the first one might be the reason millions of people spent decades avoiding one of the most nutritious foods on Earth. Eggs will clog your arteries. Imagine walking into a supermarket in the 1980s. People were buying egg substitutes. Restaurants proudly advertised egg white omelets. Doctors told patients to limit eggs. Some people were afraid to eat more than 2 or 3 a week. The reason seemed obvious. Eggs contain a lot of cholesterol. Your blood contains cholesterol. Too much cholesterol increases the risk of heart disease. Case closed. Except, your human body doesn't work like pouring oil into a machine. Here's something most people never hear. Your liver produces roughly 1 to 2 grams of cholesterol every single day. That's far more than the cholesterol in a single egg. So if your body already makes cholesterol, why would eating cholesterol automatically become dangerous? That question bothered scientists for years. Eventually, they started running much larger human studies instead of relying mainly on theory. And the results were surprising. For most healthy people, eating cholesterol has only a modest effect on blood cholesterol. Why? Because your body has a built-in thermostat. When you eat more cholesterol, your liver usually makes less. When you eat less, it often makes more. It's constantly trying to keep things balanced. Even more surprising, the cholesterol traveling through your bloodstream isn't simply coming from breakfast. It's affected by genetics, body weight, exercise, smoking, overall diet, and especially the types of fat you eat. In fact, decades of research eventually showed that saturated fat often has a much bigger influence on LDL cholesterol than dietary cholesterol itself. Large observational studies and multiple meta-analyses have found that for most people, eating about 1 egg a day isn't linked to a higher risk of heart disease. There are exceptions. Some people, often called hyper-responders, do experience larger increases in blood cholesterol after eating cholesterol-rich foods. People with certain medical conditions may also receive different advice from their doctors. Nutrition almost never has one answer that fits everyone. But here's the part that almost nobody talks about. If the egg myth became so popular despite weak evidence, what else might we have misunderstood? Because eggs weren't the only food put on trial. An entire nutrient was about to become public enemy number 1, and that fear would quietly change the way the entire world ate.
Myth 2. Fat makes you fat. This one sounds almost impossible to argue with. Eat fat, gain fat. It's right there in the name. Fat has more than twice the calories per gram compared to protein or carbohydrates, 9 calories versus 4. So surely eating fat should make people fatter. Simple. Except reality refused to cooperate. During the late 20th century, low-fat became the biggest trend in nutrition. Supermarkets filled with low-fat yogurt, low-fat cookies, low-fat salad dressing, low-fat frozen meals. Food companies proudly stamped giant, low-fat labels across everything. People believed they had finally found a secret: cut the fat, lose the fat. But something strange happened. Obesity didn't disappear, it exploded. Now, correlation isn't proof. The rise in obesity wasn't caused simply because people bought low-fat foods. Many things changed at the same time. People became more sedentary. Portion sizes increased. Ultra-processed foods became easier to buy. Sugary drinks became more common. But researchers noticed another important pattern. When manufacturers removed fat, they often had to replace it with something else. Otherwise, the food tasted like cardboard. That something else was frequently refined starches, added sugars, flavorings, and other ingredients designed to bring back taste. The product still wore a healthy-looking label, but nutritionally, it wasn't always an improvement. Imagine removing the engine from a car because it's too heavy, then replacing it with bricks. Technically, one problem disappeared, but you've created another. Years later, large clinical trials began comparing different eating patterns. Some people followed low-fat diets. Others followed Mediterranean-style diets rich in olive oil and nuts. Some followed lower carbohydrate diets. The surprising result: no single diet won for everyone. When calories and protein were similar, weight loss depended much more on whether people could actually stick with the diet over time than whether it was low-fat or low-carb. In other words, the best diet wasn't the one with the most convincing headline. It was the one someone could realistically follow for years. Suddenly, nutrition wasn't about blaming one nutrient anymore. It was becoming something much more complicated and much more interesting. Because if fat wasn't the villain, maybe sugar was. Except that story isn't as simple as people think either. Because around the time fat was losing its reputation, another nutrient quietly took its place in the courtroom: sugar. Today, it's easy to find videos claiming sugar is the root of almost every modern disease. It's blamed for obesity, heart disease, diabetes, even cancer. But is sugar really the master villain, or did we accidentally create another nutrition myth? To answer that, we need to separate something most people mix together. Sugar isn't one thing, it's a whole family. There's the sugar naturally locked inside fruit, the lactose in milk, the glucose your brain depends on every second you're alive. And then there are added sugars, mixed into soft drinks, desserts, breakfast cereals, and thousands of ultra-processed foods. That distinction matters, because your body doesn't experience all of them the same way. Think about drinking a can of fizzy drink. You can swallow the sugar in less than a minute, almost no chewing, very little fullness. Hundreds of calories arrive before your brain has much chance to say, "That's enough." Now, compare that to eating several whole oranges containing the same amount of sugar. Most people can't. The fiber slows digestion. The chewing takes time. Your body starts signaling fullness long before you reach the same amount of sugar. Same nutrient, completely different experience. This is exactly why large studies consistently link sugar-sweetened drinks with weight gain and a higher risk of type 2 diabetes. Not because sugar is magically poisonous, but because liquid calories are remarkably easy to overconsume. Scientists have repeatedly tested whether sugar has unique fattening powers. When calories are kept equal, many controlled feeding studies show that sugar itself isn't dramatically more fattening than other digestible carbohydrates. The bigger issue is that sugary foods often make eating too many calories incredibly easy. That's a very different claim. One blames the molecule, the other blames the environment, and those are not the same thing. So the myth isn't that sugar is harmless, far from it. Consistently consuming lots of added sugar, especially through drinks, can absolutely increase health risks. The myth is believing sugar is the only thing that matters. Because if you remove sugar but keep eating highly processed foods that are just as easy to overeat, you haven't solved the real problem. You've only changed the label. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If neither fat nor sugar can explain everything, what are we missing? The answer hides inside one of the oldest pieces of diet advice ever repeated.
Myth 3. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. You've probably heard it since childhood. Never skip breakfast. It kickstarts your metabolism. You'll burn more calories. You'll lose weight. You'll perform better. It sounds reasonable. After all, your body has been fasting all night. Surely it needs fuel immediately. But when researchers actually tested the idea, the story became much less certain. Some observational studies found that breakfast eaters tended to be healthier. They weighed less. They exercised more. They smoked less. At first glance, that looked like proof.
But there was a problem. Healthy people often do lots of healthy things at the same time. If someone eats breakfast every morning, they might also sleep better, exercise regularly, and eat more vegetables. So was breakfast causing better health, or was it simply traveling with healthier lifestyles? The only way to find out was through controlled trials, and those trials produced a surprise. For many adults, skipping breakfast didn't automatically slow metabolism in any meaningful way, nor did eating breakfast guarantee weight loss. Some people naturally ate fewer calories by delaying their first meal. Others became so hungry later that they overcompensated. The effect depended more on the person than on the clock. Intermittent fasting research added another twist. Many people could comfortably go without breakfast while maintaining body weight and good metabolic health. Others felt miserable. Again, there wasn't one universal answer. Then why did the myth survive for so long? Partly because breakfast cereal companies heavily promoted it decades ago. Marketing and genuine science often became tangled together. Once an idea enters schools, advertisements, and family traditions, it can survive for generations, even after evidence becomes more nuanced. And that word, nuanced, might be the biggest clue in this entire mystery. Because every myth we've uncovered has something in common. People wanted one simple rule. Reality kept refusing to provide one. But one myth remains stronger than all the others. Myth 4. The more protein you eat, the healthier you'll be. It's repeated in gyms, on social media, and in conversations almost every single day. It sounds scientific, it sounds logical, and millions of people still organize their entire diet around it. The belief that eating more protein automatically means better health. At first, that seems difficult to argue against. Protein builds muscle. Protein repairs tissues. Protein keeps you full. Athletes need plenty of it. So wouldn't eating as much as possible make everyone healthier? Not quite. Studies consistently show that higher protein diets can help preserve muscle during weight loss and improve fullness. That's real. But the benefits don't increase forever. Your body isn't a warehouse that stores unlimited extra protein as future muscle. Building muscle requires resistance training, adequate energy, sleep, and recovery. Without those signals, extra protein alone doesn't magically create bigger muscles. Then there's another popular fear, that high-protein diets destroy healthy kidneys. This idea spread for years, yet modern reviews have found little evidence that high-protein diets damage kidney function in healthy people. People who already have kidney disease often need medical guidance regarding protein intake, but that's a completely different situation. Again, a grain of truth grew into an oversimplified rule. By now, a pattern should be impossible to ignore. Every myth started with something that sounded reasonable. Every myth contained at least a small piece of truth. And every myth became misleading when people stretched that truth too far. So if nutrition isn't about finding one food to worship or one nutrient to fear, what is it actually about? That's where the biggest twist of all begins. If you've been paying close attention, you may have noticed something strange. Every myth we've uncovered started the same way. Someone noticed a real problem. Then they found a simple explanation. And eventually that explanation became a rule. Eggs became bad. Fat became the enemy. Sugar became the poison. Breakfast became mandatory. Protein became the magic solution. Different myths, the exact same pattern. But there's still one question we haven't answered. If these myths keep falling apart, why do new ones keep replacing them? Because the human brain loves certainty. Nutrition rarely offers it. No single food determines your health. No single meal determines your future. Your body is responding to thousands of decisions made over months and years. And that's exactly what makes nutrition so difficult. Scientists don't study isolated humans living in identical conditions. They study real people, people with different genes, different lifestyles, different sleep habits, different stress levels,
different cultures, different incomes, different medical conditions. That's why one study might show a benefit while another finds almost none. Not because science is broken, because humans are incredibly complicated. And this is where one final myth quietly sneaks into almost every conversation.
Myth 5. There's one perfect diet for everyone. Scroll through social media for 5 minutes. Someone says everyone should eat low carb. Someone else swears by vegan diets. Another person claims carnivore fixed every problem they ever had. Then another insists Mediterranean eating is the only scientifically proven way. They can't all be right, can they? Here's the surprising part. In a way, many of them are. Clinical trials comparing different eating patterns often find something unexpected. People can lose weight and improve health on several very different diets: Mediterranean, lower carb, plant-based, higher protein, even intermittent fasting. Each has evidence supporting it in certain situations. So how is that possible? Because most successful diets have more in common than they have differences. They usually encourage eating more whole foods, more vegetables, more minimally processed ingredients, more awareness of how much you're eating, and fewer calories from foods that are incredibly easy to overconsume. The details change, the foundation doesn't. Think of it like traveling to the same city. One person drives, another takes the train, someone else flies. Different routes, same destination. Researchers have even found enormous differences in how individuals respond to identical foods. One person's blood sugar might rise sharply after eating rice, another person's barely changes. Genetics, gut microbes, physical activity, sleep, and even the previous meal can influence the response. Nutrition is becoming more personal than scientists once believed, which means the question isn't, what's the best diet? It's, what's the best diet that you can enjoy, afford, and stick with while meeting your nutritional needs? That question doesn't make flashy headlines, but it's much closer to the truth. And now, the final piece of the puzzle. When you look back at every myth we've discussed, something remarkable appears. None of them were completely invented. Eggs do contain cholesterol. Fat is calorie-dense. Too much added sugar can harm health. Breakfast helps some people. Protein is essential. Every myth contained a real observation. The mistake happens when people stretched one observation into a universal law. That's what myths do. They take a piece of the truth and pretend it's the whole picture. Science works differently. Science keeps asking, what did we miss? That's why nutrition advice changes, not because scientists can't make up their minds, because better evidence replaces older evidence. In the 1950s, researchers didn't have the massive meta-analyses we have today. They didn't have decades of long-term cohort studies following hundreds of thousands of people. They didn't have modern randomized controlled trials comparing different eating patterns over months and years. As new evidence accumulated, the picture became clearer. Not perfect, just clearer. And that's something worth celebrating. Changing your minds when better evidence appears isn't weakness. It's exactly how science is supposed to work. So maybe the biggest nutrition myth that refuses to die isn't about eggs, or fat, or sugar, or breakfast, or protein. Maybe it's the belief that nutrition has simple villains and simple heroes. Because your body doesn't care about internet arguments. It responds to patterns, to what you eat most of the time, to how you move, whether you sleep, whether you recover, whether your diet gives it the nutrients it needs. Health isn't built by one superfood, and it isn't destroyed by one slice of cake. It's built quietly through thousands of ordinary choices that rarely make the headlines. So the next time someone tells you they found the one food that will save your life or the one food that will destroy it, pause for a second. Ask the question that science never stops asking. What's the full story? Because that's usually where the real answer is hiding. Subscribe for more, and thank you for watching.